Okay, welcome to the Warrant Finance Committee meeting of December 16th. It is 6:20, and the first thing on the agenda is to salute the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just give you some thoughts that I put together.
The second thing is approve the minutes of the last meeting. Do I hear a motion?
I move that we accept the minutes of the last meeting.
It's moved and seconded, we accept the minutes of the last meeting. Any discussion? All those in favor? The next thing is the MMA. There's two parts to this, and before I forget, I want to address a question that Tom had. I believe it was the meeting, Tom, that we organized, and you asked me to forward a question to the selectmen on whether or not we would have direct access to MMA. And that's right, didn't you, Tom?
That's correct.
And so me being me, I kind of forgot. And so I addressed it a couple of weeks ago. And the selectmen said no. And where the selectmen control, I guess, if they've told MMA, I guess, that the only one to deal with is Jennifer Rue, and I assume Michelle, and they said that if we had any questions, just give them to them, and they would forward them. And in the paperwork I gave tonight, just to back up just a little bit, we had scheduled a meeting, or I had scheduled a meeting, to meet with the department heads to discuss capital improvements. And the day of the meeting, I was called that afternoon and said it wasn't legal up for us to have the meeting and they wanted the meeting canceled. So we canceled the meeting. And I called everybody. I questioned the authority of that. In reading the ordinance, at the following selectmen's meeting, I came and stated that I had read the ordinance several times and I could not see where it was illegal under town law for me to call that meeting. And so I gave the question in writing to the selectmen, if it was legal or not, and I addressed the question to the legal department. And I told them I didn't care if they sent it to MMA, if they sent it to the attorney. It didn't matter to me one way or the other. So, after a couple of weeks, Jennifer gave me it in writing, the answer, and rather than me read the whole thing, I gave everybody a copy. The gist of it is, we can call a meeting anytime we want, with anybody we want. And the way we operate is under the guidelines of the town meeting. And in a nutshell, if the town meeting doesn't like the way we're running our meetings or who we're meeting with, they can vote different people out in the town meeting and change the course of the way this Warrant Finance Committee operates this year. So, with that part being said, the reason, now we're out here in public, that I wanted to have this meeting, was because I felt it was a good idea, and I talked to all the departments in town, and they all also thought it was a good idea to have a so-called workshop before we get into the budget process on what they saw for their departments for capital improvements that they're looking for the next 1 to 5 years. So that as a Warrant Finance Committee, we could put it all together, and hopefully with the departments, we could agree on prioritizing what the needs of the town are and the timeline, so it would be organized and the townspeople would know what to look forward to. And the fire department, both road departments, the rec department, and the municipal department all agreed. But that didn't happen. So my question is, now it all kind of flows all together here from the MMA to the rationale. So what I'd like to know is this something that the Warrant Finance Committee wants me to pursue? The department budgets, I think, due in the town to the selectmen by the end of January. The selectmen said they're going to create a capital improvement committee. They put that off till January. My purpose of calling that meeting was not for a debate. My purpose for that meeting was to just have the fire department speak their piece, each road department speak their piece, so on and so forth. And I explained to them the debate would be during the budget process. The selectmen said they're going to start a capital improvement committee in January. What's your thoughts?
Can I ask a couple questions and get some clarification on a couple of issues?
Sure.
In the way of getting to the standoff that we came to, I think part of the problem originated last year when I asked a specific legal question, and at that point in time, our treasurer said she would get a response to that from MMA. She got a response to a question that she put together, not that I put together, and it was not responsive to my questions. So I asked trying to be consistent with the way Maine MMA likes to run things through one person. I requested she go back and clarify what the question was, and she did not do that. She went to the Board of Selectmen. The Selectmen said no, they would not forward it, and that terminated that issue at that time. I would like to come back to that, but do I understand that your understanding now is that we do have direct access to MMA, and that we can, if we so choose, ask questions of MMA directly from this board or wherever, or
From the chair to Jennifer,
from the chair to Jennifer?
town administrator.
All right, and whose decision is that, and who's made that decision? Because the MMA is there and accessible according to its bylaws to all municipal officials.
Right, I've read that, Tom.
I don't have a problem with that.
And what I've been told, at this meeting that I asked this question at, that whatever question the Warrant Finance Committee has, give it to the chair will present it to the town administrator, and it'll be asked how it is written.
Okay, I don't have a problem with that procedure, okay? That's fine, as long as we know that we can get our questions answered. The next part of the clarification is, I understand as a consequence of this, the selectmen are not going to refuse to send questions that we have, is that correct?
They said at that meeting that they would send any question that was brought forward from the chairman of the Warrant Finance.
Thank you, that's fine. And having said that, with respect to the question that you raised here about meeting with people before we get into the formal budgeting process, I'm absolutely in favor of doing that.
And with that being said, Tom, I didn't say this part. The selectmen, we can make even recommendations on things without a warrant in front of us.
That's correct.
And that's under, again, from MMA, and that doesn't mean that the selectmen have to write the warrant articles that we recommend, or they don't have to accept our recommendation.
That's correct.
But the law is very clear that whatever recommendations we do make have to be printed on the warrant article.
That's correct. That's my understanding also. All right.
Anybody else have any input? What they think about any of this? What I'm bringing out here?
Well, I think it's a good idea. I mean, it was something that was done before.
Yeah, we used to do it years ago, when Gloria Lovely was here at the school. You remember, Tom, you were selectman at the time.
Going back hundreds of years.
No, but, I mean, we used to have a meeting every November.
Yeah.
Before the holidays, and all the departments would sit down and have a talk and let everybody know how everybody's doing, and if there's any problems or not. It was more to create cohesiveness more than anything.
I think the other thing to recognize there is that this is a meeting of this committee. It's not a committee managed by the Board of Selectmen here, okay? That we run this, okay? And that's the way it should be, okay? Or my understanding of the way it should be.
And that's my understanding, and that's, as chair, that's the way I'm gonna operate till our town meeting. But
So is this voluntary on the part of the department managers?
oh, yeah.
Okay.
When I spoke to them before, Virginia, when we was gonna do it, they were all in, and they thought it was a great idea, and they wanted to meet.
Historically, Virginia, this is the way things went for years, okay? All my time in town for 50 years. I mean, we always had meetings right on through the whole budgeting process and sat down with the committees ahead of time. Warrant and Finance did, and the room would be populated with people from the town.
So will this all be done in one evening or one day?
Yeah, I think you could do it easy enough, because basically is what anybody worth their salt knows, that every department should have a 5-year plan. I mean, that's just common, private business or public, it's just good management.
So will there be an agenda? Will they let us know ahead of time, sort of some bullet points as to what they want to discuss with us?
I just thought, Virginia, honestly, that what we'd do is just give the floor to Ricky Smith and let him talk.
For how long?
Well, hopefully not as long as I would.
I think with any meeting, it's beneficial to have at least some bullet point ideas as to what the discussion's going to be, because I don't want it to get into rambling on ancient history of the town and
No, I agree.
the what-ifs and I don't want to.
I would suggest that if you did call that meeting, that you ask them all for that in advance, if they could give you an outline of what they're gonna present, and then we could all look at it ahead of time.
Yeah.
You know, just, even if it's just a list, not the details, but just,
Yeah.
I'm gonna talk about a new truck and a new ambulance, or I'm gonna talk about doing, paving, or I'm gonna talk, whatever, just
Yeah.
something generalized.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And during the meeting, if you think it's going astray or whatever, that it's going too far or too far out there or something, speak up.
Just grab his gavel.
That's the chairman's job to manage
You know what I mean?
as he sees fit.
He's got his interrupter here now.
Even if I'm the one doing it, speak up. No, because my point is, we all have equal say here.
Yep.
Okay, my only responsibility, in reality, is just running the meeting,
Calling them.
calling the meeting, and then running the meeting, that's it. You know what I mean? And everybody on this board has equal say. Whether they're regular members, or whether they're alternates, or what position they hold. At least, that's how I plan on running it. So you think it would be a good idea, Virginia?
I do.
Roland?
I agree with it in concept. However, I see it as a possible point of conflict with our illustrious selectmen. To wit, is conceivable that someone could see this as a step around the forming of a capital improvement committee. You know, and I'm not saying I support that endeavor as well, you know. Yeah, I just don't want somebody taking our efforts the wrong way. In other words, you know, I'm on the bandwagon right now as far as, hey, you guys said you wanted to have a capital improvement committee for the town to break out all these things, you know, that the road commissioners need, the fire department needs, the town needs, the back of this building fixed.
Transfer station.
Transfer station has some issues. I mean, you know, there's different things, and I'm not gonna exclude the school either, okay?
No.
But.
The school was
you know,
invited to that.
If we aren't careful, you know, it could be conceived that, you know, we're trying to sidestep the, you know, formation of this committee, and now we're gonna, you know, I don't know, spearhead, whatever. You know, I support the Capital Improvement Committee, the formation of the committee. I want the committee to go forward. I want the selectmen to, you know, provide that committee with a purpose so that, you know, it's not just, boom, you guys are a committee and, okay, what do we do now, folks? You haven't given us any guidelines. You know, I mean, it's one thing to say, you are the chair, but if you don't give the chair
A directive.
a direction to go in, or, you know, some guidance, you know, what good does it do for you to have this committee? So, you know, that's my only
Observation.
thank you. That's my only reservation.
Mr. Chairman?
Well, you could just look at it the other way. This would be a head start. A little, getting everybody in here would be, they would be thinking about down the line of a 5-year plan, so that if they do form the committee, some of the information will be already out there. I don't know
Well, it's not a
why.
matter of if they do form the
Hold
committee.
on a minute, Ron.
Why? They've been thinking about it for a long time. It hasn't, you know, they talk a lot, but I haven't seen anything done. I mean, you volunteered to be on it.
Last January.
Yeah, I mean, here we are almost a year later, and it hasn't, we're no further than you saying it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Consistent with the correspondence with MMA and the historic history of town meeting form of government, if a conflict arises, it's up to the town meeting to straighten it out, to resolve it, and it does that in the form of an ordinance, okay? So, there's always the possibility of conflict. There's a conflict between this board and the Board of Selectmen, between this board and the school committee, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If there's an issue that can't be resolved, then the town meeting resolves it. And if the town meeting can't resolve it, then you go to the judge.
Go ahead, Ron.
There's only one problem, and with what your thought is, okay? Town meeting only happens once a year. I understand you can call special town meetings, but you try and get a special town meeting through 3 selectmen who don't want to do it. I'm not saying that they wouldn't. You'd have to have, you know, proper justification for the need for that town meeting, because they're gonna, well, town meetings cost us money if we have to have a special town meeting, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, I mean, yes, the town meeting is the ultimate yay or nay in the final end of things, but it only comes around once a year.
The town meeting doesn't, the selectmen don't have the ultimate authority to determine when a town meeting occurs. In the event that the selectmen refuse to have the town meeting resolve an issue, we have a thing called a petition.
Yes. Understand that as well.
And that works, because I've used it on more than one
And
occasion.
how long does it take, Tom?
Takes a while.
It takes a while. You have to get a bunch of signatures on a petition.
Yep.
okay? And I understand, once you get all your signatures that are required on the petition, you hand it in, and they gotta do it.
You know, they don't actually have to do it, but that's okay.
Yeah, they do.
No, they don't, but that's
Well,
okay. Kara, okay, I won't go into that anymore.
I just think that there's a big difference between the capital improvement committee and us looking at the upcoming, I mean, we're just looking at it for budget purposes, just to have an idea when we go into the budget season, what everybody's thinking. I don't think that we're assisting them in developing a capital improvement plan or making any recommendations to what their priorities should be. I think we just want to hear what they've got, what they're thinking of, so that when it's budget season, we know in the back of our mind, well, this, before they all start coming one by one to present their budget, to kind of get a overview, a snapshot of what we're going to be looking at as we go into the budget season. I think it's really totally different, and most of the departments have them, you know? They already know. You know, the fire department has one, the rec has one, the school has one. I don't know if transfer does or...
It avoids surprises.
Yeah.
It's always good to avoid a surprise.
I want to have that little bullet point list in the back of my mind of what the big ticket items are going into the budget season, so that I know that when people are asking for additional things or this or that. Because like in the case of the school, you know, John Ross said, we don't have anything. We're just going to be fixing one little thing in the parking lot, I think.
They're gonna be paving the parking lot next year.
And that's it. And he's like, so, well, if we didn't know, we could think that they were gonna, they had, you know, they're gonna redo the roof, or, you know, something big going into it. We don't know. So it's nice to know the overall picture of all, the town as a whole going into it.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. And I also think we ought to reiterate to the department heads that this is totally voluntary on their part.
Yeah.
There'll be no decisions, no votes taken by this committee. We're here to listen, to get ourselves up to speed.
Yeah, and that's what I had said to them as individuals last time, Virginia.
Yeah.
You know, Bobby Mann, when I talked to Bobby up at the transfer station, he says, no, I don't think there really is anything. And then the more we talked, there ended up being 3 or 4 things that we really need to look at in the next 4 or 5 years that really need to be addressed. You know what I mean? So once he got thinking about it, this is what we're looking at the transfer station, you know what I mean? So from nothing to 15 minutes later, because as you know, I like to talk a lot, I don't know if he came up with things to get rid of me, or he just got thinking about it and says, you know, we really should be doing this, or we really should be doing that.
Yeah, I mean, people that aren't used to doing budget planning
Right.
aren't necessarily thinking 3 years, 5 years down the road.
And understanding it's just a plan.
Yeah,
It doesn't mean it's gonna happen,
no, but it could be.
because other things take priority. David, what's your thoughts?
I'm just learning.
No?
I'm listening.
I want to know, if this is, we're talking about what we're gonna be doing this year, and you're a member of the committee, and I wanna know what your feelings are about it. You got just as much right to your opinion as anybody else sitting up here, and we all wanna hear it. That's why the people put you on the board, guy.
Yeah. I don't know if I was another committee. I know what I used to do. I used to go with one of the Warrant and Finance committee members, and then we used to sit at the road committee. Me and Bernie would go up there and put our budget down, and then they went with it from there and brought it before the town.
Yeah.
You want to get a committee out there, I think it's just a bunch of more paperwork and, well, there's no doubt more ideas probably, but
No, we don't wanna get a committee out there, Dave. This isn't what we mean. The selectmen don't want the committee. What we're talking about is these departments just coming in and meeting with us. We're not gonna have a capital improvement committee.
yeah.
All we're talking about is each department head, each road commissioner, the fire department, the rec department, come in and meet with us.
Yeah.
It's not starting another committee, that's on the selectmen, that's got nothing to do with us, and this is stuff that they're looking at above and beyond their regular budget.
Yeah,
You know, and I'll use the roads for an example. The road budget, for the most part, has been, stayed the same for 8 to 10 years. Okay, so the roads are getting farther and farther and farther behind. And I want to know, because it's been shut out, what do the road commissioners, these are people that we elected to take care of our roads. So I want to know what they say that we need to do on these roads. I don't want to hear what the selectmen let them say at town meeting. I want to hear what they have to say. I want to hear what Bobby Mann has to say. I want to hear what the fire chief has to say. I just want to hear what they have to say, that's all. Go on.
I think the notion here is that we start out with a big overview of all the issues we have facing us. We don't focus on them and get very specific with them, but it's to our advantage to have that big overview before we go down and start dealing with the small parts of the budget, right? And if we can get that big overview at this particular meeting, then we can speak intelligently to the budget moving forward as we narrow our focus down to individual budgets. That's my thinking of the way this should work.
I mean, I guess an example would be prioritizing, say if the fire department, in their plan, we gotta get a new truck next year, okay? And the road department, says we've gotta change that, culvert over there on West Shore Drive. It's failing, we got no choice. DOT says we gotta do something, the insurance or whoever. Then you can have the conversation with the fire department and say, what's the ramifications of putting off this new fire truck for 1 year, and we spend the money down on West Shore Drive this year, and rather than the road commissioners coming in, we need to do this, and it ends up being a big, I just think people sitting down and have a conversation will simplify a lot of stuff.
I'm in 100% agreement with you.
Make a motion?
Yeah, I'd take a motion, what you guys want to do, if you want to have this meeting. If you don't, I will say, no, I won't. Go ahead.
I will make a motion then that we request the various department heads to meet with us on an informal basis with a notion to focusing on a long-term view and a short-term view, and giving us an idea of where they think they need money and to what end and to what purpose. And it's an informal deal. Again, no action.
Yeah.
Right, that's not very clear. If I thought it out more, I probably could have gotten some.
Yeah, I kind of I stopped writing halfway through that motion.
You want the secretary to clean it up?
I want the secretary to clean it up, and if I don't like it, we'll straighten it out next time we get together and approve the minutes. Okay, Carol?
Yes.
Thank you.
So I'll ask for the secretary to read the motion.
All right. Request various department heads to meet with us on an informal basis to discuss any upcoming,
Major expenses, to
discuss any major
Budget items,
potentially
major.
Okay, right.
The next 5 years.
potentially major budget items.
Future.
And bring to our
Any
attention-
future,
Once you send it out, what you'll...
oh goodness, request various department heads to meet with us on an informal basis to discuss any future,
Capital improvements.
that doesn't make sense, but any, future major budget items.
And to define for us, give us a view of the urgency of doing
Prioritize
those.
those items.
Well, we have to prioritize them here, but the urgency from their point of view,
Right.
how high a priority they are for them.
Yeah, to discuss any.
It's okay. We'll have minutes
We'll work it
reviewed
out, yeah.
and right, okay. I think we all have an idea where we're trying to go with this, right? A vision of what we want.
Email it to everybody.
Yeah.
What's that?
I say she can figure it all out.
Proper English and just send it out. Do I have a second on that motion?
So that's Tom.
Seconded.
Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Are you voting no, David?
No, I'm just gonna hold off. I wanna,
Well, you have to do, either you gotta vote yes, no, or you gotta abstain.
okay, I'll just say no.
Okay. That's just the way it is under the rules.
Yep.
Every member has to document it, how they vote.
When were you thinking of starting this?
Well, I was doing it last month,
I know, but
so we
now-
missed that one. I believe they're meeting with the auditor on the 13th of January, which I think is the second Monday of the month.
Shoot.
I don't know, what everybody would think about the third Monday.
We'll leave it
20th?
up, we'll leave it up to you and see when you can get these people together. We may want to do it in two
Two nights? Yeah, yeah, and that's fine, we could do the roads one night and,
See what works for everybody.
Yeah.
Yep. And, we'll leave it up to you. I mean, it's an
Okay.
informal thing anyway, which doesn't involve
Yeah.
doing business, but.
no, and I'll have a conversation with all the departments and we'll see what we can get set up. And I think to your point, Virginia, if we did it in two pieces, it'd probably be easier on everybody.
Yeah, I mean, some of them will probably be relatively short compared to.
I don't know as though we need it in two, because the school's not coming.
Right, the
You know,
school's
the
not
transfer
coming.
station just has a couple of things. The rec already has an established capital improvement plan. It's literally just gonna be to hand it to you. So you just got the roads and the town hall. I think you should be able to accomplish it in one
Okay.
night. I don't see why
We'll see
not.
what-
And when you talk to them, you're going to ask them, like Virginia wanted, you know, if they could give us the bullet points.
Yeah,
There is an advantage actually to having it in one night, and we'd have everybody here, and we could kind of sort through with them how to prioritize these things.
hearing what everybody else has to say
And
too.
have everybody understand what everybody else's issues are. So there is some advantage to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, because we might hear that the roads need a major.
Right.
And we might say, hey, you know what, my stuff could really wait.
Right, right, right.
So we
Doesn't
did-
do any good buying a new fire truck if the bridge is out and you can't get the fire truck on the bridge, right?
Don't make much
Absolutely.
sense, does it?
Okay, cut that.
So with that being done, the other question is, we voted at our first meeting to try to follow Robert's Rules of Order. I went to a workshop and I gave you guys the paperwork. It basically lays out the way to operate a meeting, and it's basic on Robert's Rules. The question is, for the committee, and is we do have authority to make our own policies, the way we operate. I'm not quite sure I know what bylaws are and I know what policies are. I know that a committee can only encumber the existing time frame that committee's in office.
For 1 year.
Right, so till June 30th or whatever, and then you can't the next one. What does the committee feel? Do we need to get some policies? Do we need to get bylaws? What's your pleasure? I want this conversation. Mr. Gore?
The way I frame this is that we follow Robert's rules administered by the chairman to the extent necessary to maintain order and civil discourse. In other words, if you try to adhere too closely to Robert's rules, you could tie this committee up and spend hours
I
and hours
agree.
and hours doing it. So I think, having said that, let's try and abide by Robert's rules to the extent necessary to do that, administered by you. And if we have an objection to that, we'll discover it and deal with it as time goes by.
And this pamphlet I sent out is definitely a simplified version
Yeah.
of Robert's Rules.
Right.
It's more like for people like me.
Yeah.
And it's not Arnie was very nice and gave me a small book. But this is even smaller.
Right.
And it's a lot easier to follow.
Point is, you don't have to follow Robert's rules, even according to Robert's rules, as long as you don't need to. You use them when you need them, and that's all.
Well, I think the biggest thing with it is giving everybody a chance to speak without interruptions. Have the debate, and respect.
Right.
You know, in the past few years especially, there's been some disrespect going back and forth from other departments or from the podium to the committee and stuff like that. And there's nothing progressive about acting that way. You know what I mean? And I'll tell you now up front, with the research I've done, if you get somebody, for example, in the audience hollering every time Virginia spoke, trying to cut her off or saying stuff, what I would plan on doing, so we know now right up front, is say, I'm gonna gavel and say, you're out of order. You know what I mean? And the next time, if they won't stop, I probably would announce, if this doesn't stop and it's out of control, we'll take a recess, a 5-minute recess or something like that. And then if it will start back up, and if it continues, we'll adjourn the meeting. And the next time we have the meeting, we'll have the sheriff here, I guess, and we'll have an orderly meeting, just like you would at town meeting. And if somebody is totally disruptive of the meeting, they'll be asked to leave. Because I think it's very sad when people are sitting on these committees, and not just this committee, any committee, volunteer countless hours of time to be disrespected over their opinions. I don't think it's right. Like I said earlier, everybody's opinion here is just as valuable as the next person's. And sometimes when I give my opinion, I remember once, I don't remember when it was, like 2003, I was wrong about something. It was about 2003 last time you heard me wrong about something, Tom. But other than that...
I'm wrong about something most every day, Dan.
No, I mean, this is, I just don't want to go through some of the baloney that I've seen the committee go through in the past. And it's not fair to anybody. It's not fair to the other people sitting there. It's not fair to the people up here.
I think the meeting needs to be orderly up here and down there.
I agree, both places. And I'm going to do my best. And honestly, Virginia, if I get slacked about it, feel free to speak up.
I mean, in general, I've never read or been on a committee that used Robert's Rules of Orders, but since we can create policies, I don't know if some of the things that you just mentioned in there, half of them are things I wrote down, aren't something that we could just as easily put in a policy memo as opposed to...
Is that, we wouldn't have to adopt it. This is just...
Well, if it was a policy of how we're going to conduct this committee,
Okay.
then it would essentially be maybe a couple of page memo.
I think it would be useful to adopt it, Dennis, because of what that says is, we all agree. Now, you folks abide by this, or
Yeah.
we will do our business. So if we are going to go beyond Robert's rules, as opposed to using just what I've had here, and I don't think you're going beyond Robert's rules doing that, we can simply say we're going to abide by Robert's rules to the extent necessary, and you are vested with the authority to interpret those.
And maybe a lot of these items that we all have in our heads are in the shorter version of the full version of Robert's Rule. I don't know, as I say, I have not.
Well, it can get very complex.
Rules, how you run the meeting, and how
Yeah.
votes are done, and how you can, reconsider a motion. Say, there's a big debate, there's just rules on how you gotta do everything, so everybody follows, and they're pretty simple.
I will say that I have gone to annual meetings where they follow Robert's Rules of Orders in this, second and third motion and revisiting things, and it's like,
Well, that's how you,
Quite informal.
that's how you get bogged down in it. There's another suggestion here too that we could consider, and that would be to use the moderator's manual. okay? Because the moderator's manual prioritizes, and gives you a set of motions and actions that, are you familiar with it, Dennis? Have you ever?
I'm more familiar with Robert's rules.
Okay, well, whatever. I mean, they're basically the same thing. The
Right.
moderator's manual is a specialized version of Robert's.
The only thing difference is that the moderator's manual doesn't cover committees.
Right.
And the duties of committees and how you,
Yep.
and other than that,
Yep.
everything that's on the,
But the prioritizing of motions and the need either to act on them immediately or to act on them in the future.
The problem with it, though, is unless you've been in government like you have, Tom, I mean, lots of times when we're going through motions and stuff like that, I get lost halfway through it. Like, you know, it's very complicated for somebody that hasn't been
That's why I say
for
it's.
so many years, and
you-
like, sometimes it feels like if we just had a two-page policy on how we were gonna operate a meeting, it might be a little easier for the average person that's sitting on the board.
Well, I'm also thinking even more so about people sitting in the
Yeah,
audience.
why you're
If they're
doing that.
waiting for the right moment to inject a question or a comment, and they're like, oh, they're through with that, now I can't go back to that. You know, it's like, they get disillusioned, they don't want to, they can't participate at that level that they want to, so it's like, see you later, going home.
Yeah.
Well, I think, that Dennis, Chairman, you can just say, does anybody have anything they want to say?
Well, the way I hope to have it go is, you know, whatever's we're talking about, we'll read, say if it's a warrant, we'll read the warrant, see if somebody wants to make a motion, second it. We'll have our debate on this warrant, and if people from the public want something to say, they can say it after we have our debate, but before we vote on it, so that we can take their input before we vote on it, instead of voting on it and then letting them, you know what I mean? Doesn't really make much sense. It's kind of like having public forum at the end of a meeting. Anything that's been decided during the meeting is kind of too late, so why say anything? So that's the way as long as the committee's fine with that, that's the way I'd like to see it run.
Maybe what we ought to do is, maybe we ought to ask you to put together a one piece of paper describing these little things.
This,
And then we could discuss them the next time we get together, because we're kind of rambling on right
Yeah.
now, but
I would
and I
like
don't have a problem with that.
I would like time to read this, because I'm, you know, this is the first time I've seen it, and, it's definitely a lot easier to understand Robert's rules in reading this thing.
Robert's rules, if you're not very careful, Robert's rules can tie you up in knots.
But this doesn't,
I agree.
it doesn't get lost in the minutia. This is very like itemized bullets and numbers, and it's boom, 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 and it's very easy for, somebody like me to,
I mean, Virginia has had, and anybody can do this, if she doesn't mind, she's had experience writing up some policies and stuff for the town, and if you wanted to, between now and whenever we decide, Virginia, to kind of write something up, and it's up to you.
Propose it.
No.
Bring it back.
Or would you rather not?
No, I would like to. I have 2 dates in January, so my vision is not very good until then.
Yeah.
I, did hand
We
out.
need some of this stuff with a magnifying glass. And
I did hand out, one that Tom he wrote, you know, a one-page, his thoughts and ideas about policies.
Yeah,
I did hand that out, and I know you have some, and I gave you what I had.
Yeah, but we don't have to have it for our next meeting.
No, we don't, and we're not going to be having public discussions of merit to vote on
Right.
until sometime after January.
Yeah.
You know, so there's nothing.
At least
All right, so by the end of January, I will be,
yeah, no, that's fine, Virginia, that's fine, because our meeting that we would have in January would be just listening. And you guys all have the school budget timeline. Pass that out tonight. I'm sure that might change depending on the weather, but, this is the conversation that Jen had with Kim today. And I asked her to print it out for us so that we could, look it over. And we've always been tried to be accommodating with whatever the school schedule is. Hopefully, everything will work out fine this year, and talking to Kim and Judy, they didn't, at this time anyway, unless something comes up, see any big to do with the school next year other than get the paving done in the parking lot, which that paving was done 30 years ago. It surely
It needs it.
Needs it, yeah.
It's a
One
safety.
other question relative to the school. Last year, I sent them, the principal and Kim, an email just telling them who their contacts were on Warrant and Finance Committee and the phone numbers, you know,
Yeah.
that they could contact
Yeah.
anybody, but
Yeah.
this was-
Kim asked Jen today, Jen told me Kim asked about my email, and Jen told her what it was, and she says, but, you might want his phone number. And asked if it was okay, give him a phone number, and I says, yeah, no problem at all. John's called me before anyway, I'm sure he's got it, but, and what I'll do is, normally, John, after he gets done, whatever he's doing here with administration, last few, at least since he's been there, he's called the chair and wanted a meeting sometime in January, just to go over the contact information and whatever else he wants to talk about.
And along those lines, last year, and the last couple of years, since I've been here, we were required, was my understanding by the Board of Selectmen, to only use that round cube web server. Is that what we're doing this year? Because it would be nice to know where to look for information, questions, and just discussion amongst people on the committee.
I use it. You know.
Emails that I get sent out, that Carol sends out for me on that.
Yeah.
And as you can see, they're very limited.
Haven't had much reason yet,
I have
but that, he
explained,
will be using that.
I have explained very clearly that I do not use a computer. I don't send out emails. There's nothing behind the closed doors here, so face-to-face for me, but,
I would like to offer a thought on that. I do not use it, and I made it very clear to the Board of Selectmen last year that I would not use it. And there is good reason for that, which they understood at the time. Besides which, I find it very frustrating to use. It's not an easy thing to use. So I think everybody has my email address. That's where I'm going to be.
So I always send it to, like if you, if I send something to you, Tom, I send it to your personal email
Yep.
and the other one,
Yep.
only because the other one's the town's record that I sent you an email.
That's fine. I don't have a problem with that.
I do agree with the Board of Selectmen on the fact that we should use it, and I use it, when I email on behalf of him under his account, it'll be from that. I won't be emailing from my personal email.
Who gets copies on that? Is it the town administrator, the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, or none of the above?
None of the above, unless we directly want
Other
them
years it was
copied.
different.
Yeah,
Did
I don't
copy
think
them.
that, no. On the emails amongst ourselves, I don't copy anybody when I send them last year or this year. Unless it was specific, you know, maybe to the liaison, like Ed, maybe, if it was something that, but if it was a discussion amongst
I
ourselves.
mean, they were pretty definite the past couple of years, so I
Yeah,
just
to copy.
think we ought to
Yeah,
either have that discussion with them or just understand whether it's optional or it's not optional.
yeah. I know that they've said it's not optional. I mean, they can't force anybody to do anything, you know, because we're volunteers, we're not employees, but,
once again, they can do that with certain committees if they wish. The Warrant and Finance Committee, again, as this letter from MMA says, is not under the auspices of the selectmen.
but we still are under the offices that we have to respect the freedom of information.
Oh, yes,
And any correspondence with us needs to be public.
yeah.
I am probably the first town municipal official who was ever abused of the Freedom of Information Act back in the great chaos over the Sanford contract. And I sent a lot of emails from my home up here so they could get printed up. Again, my objection is founded in the fact that certain people in these offices have in the past read those emails on that server and taken action which they had no right to do based on what they read without any consultation or anything else. And that's why I will not use it, and
But the poor behavior of one individual shouldn't erode a whole system. I don't, if an individual acted inappropriately on something that they shouldn't have been, acting on, then the individual should be addressed. But I'm just a very strong believer in open, when you're on a committee, that if I wasn't on this committee and I wanted to know what you're talking about, I think I have the right to know. And it bothers me.
I will agree with you, Carol, and I don't have a problem with that, but I think before I use it, or would consider using it, I want an understanding with
Yes, that's
those who
fair.
have access to it, that they're not going to take any action or do
That's
anything
fair.
with respect to what they're reading. And as, if I have that assurance, that's fine, okay?
I think that's a fair expectation to have.
It should have the same
Absolutely.
privacy as mail. If there needs to be, if it needs to be put in public for one reason or another on Freedom of Information Act, that's fine. But what has happened in the past has not.
Yeah.
All it does is create confusion, and
How long ago was this?
it's happened several times, but about 3 years ago, actually, I think it was, though.
There's a different cast of characters around now, both here and there.
No, same characters. But that's okay. If I can have an agreement, I don't have a problem, but
Okay. I'm going to pursue that because I do believe in it. I believe the only thing that the public shouldn't be able to read is if it's a personnel issue or, one of those very few things that aren't public. And I believe in that wholeheartedly. That's half the problem with town government, is that there's too many things that aren't out there.
I mean, using that server allows the Board of Selectmen to keep up with all these different committees.
I don't understand why more committees aren't on it yet,
I know a few times you've tried to get on it and stuff, it's awful hard to get on sometimes, or it was.
Yeah, it's a lot easier if you have a smartphone and you download the app. Jennifer can help anybody set that up, and then it's no different than using Outlook or Gmail or anything else.
I mean, I've asked for hard copy documentation as a training tool.
Yeah,
Doesn't exist.
no. I had to bring my phone up, and then she said, do this, and I was like, oh, well, that makes sense.
Yeah, well, that doesn't help me if 6 months
No.
later I go to do the same thing and say, how the hell did I do that before?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
But once it's set up, it's set up,
Like that, unplug it.
So, is there any, I will, talk to the departments and try to set a date, and working with Jen and them, for availability and when we can, meet.
I have one other item that I'd like to bring up and bring to your attention. I think it should be brought up now because it affects what's going on right now, and that has to do with this last section of what I provided here. It has to do with the time this committee has to deal with issues. In the past, we have been given a warrant and asked to deliver votes within 24 hours of having received that warrant. That doesn't fly. Okay, so I have suggested some time frames here. We have warrants at least 7 days before. We are expected to vote on them and to get notices out, et cetera. If we are going to be a committee accessible to the public has to know that these meetings are taking place. And we have had meetings where where votes were demanded of us within 24 hours of having received a warrant, and that is not a good way to do business.
Didn't that frequently seem to happen in the last couple of years, is all I can speak to, when there were changes in what department managers had in their proposals for their budget?
No.
And there was some changes that required us to sit down again and
Yeah, every time they
vote on
change something, we have to.
And because we were running towards the end of the budget season, and there were, seems to me more than just a couple of times where the calendar didn't allow for a full 7 days or a full 5 days or whatever. It was done on short notice because it was a change from what we had already been aware of or working on.
I agree, Virginia. I think it was,
I don't know how you
last
present
year
those
anyway,
things.
which is my only frame of reference.
There is a way to,
When they would, we had the basis, we had the root article, and they might change the amount, or they might change the wording or the
Yeah.
intent, but it was, we knew, like, that there was this article for,
Right, it was an amendment.
yeah, it was an amendment,
Not a
exactly.
total surprise.
Yeah.
if you read through this, I think I deal with this for editorial changes in the article. Well, let me just read through and describe to you what I'm suggesting. Committee shall require, accepting that when polled by the secretary and confirmed by the chairman upon a 2/3 vote of the committee, then you require 7 days notice for a meeting, okay? And then it goes on and on and on. So this committee can decide whether the change is sufficient enough to require a notice or not, the way I proposed this, all right? So when you get your initial warrant, you want that 7 days. If you have to make a couple of editorial changes or whatever, this committee can decide whether that constitutes a whole new warrant, or can decide whether it can act on that regardless, okay? So I would ask you to take a look at this anyway as a way of moving forward. Point is, two years ago, the school warrant came to us. Sight unseen, we hadn't seen a warrant, okay? And we voted within 24 hours. That happened, and that's not the only time it's happened.
Yeah, well,
That is hard.
I will say, Tom, that I doubt very much that's gonna happen.
Right.
And I believe in the 7-day notice, I believe that might even be, it's in Robert's rules, I think, or it's in the law. You have to give 7 days notice.
Unless you have an emergency.
Unless you have an emergency.
Yeah.
Right. In that particular case, I objected to it formally in the course of the meeting. There was no emergency, there was no need for an emergency, there was plenty of time, but
And the selectmen,
demanded.
they also have a policy, and they hold the departments.
Yeah, we're held to that, the 7-day notice, and there's no, you can't, they don't want you, like, we had, an incident where we didn't have a quorum, so we knew we weren't gonna have a quorum, and we tried to cancel the meeting, and it was too late. You had to still come and show that you don't have a quorum. You know, you couldn't not.
Right.
You know, you couldn't cancel the
Then you'll
meeting.
go.
That's correct.
Yeah.
But if we're going to have people here, if we can expect people to come to our meeting and come intelligently, they have to have a warrant to come with, they have to come having had time to think about what the discussion is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have not been afforded that luxury in
Well, you know, hopefully in the future,
Yep.
we'll all leave here with a big hug.
That's not the rules.
Leave that one out of the
It'll never be in the
policy.
rules.
We can adopt that policy, right?
So if there's nothing else, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You
Thank
missed
you,
it.
Virginia.
I didn't get here soon enough.